The British tabloids are in mourning again. Not for democracy, not for the economy, not even for the royal family's permanently collapsing approval ratings among younger audiences. No, this week's national emergency is that Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, posted anniversary photos with her husband and somehow overshadowed an official royal visit. Imagine being so committed to melodrama that a married couple celebrating their anniversary becomes an act of constitutional warfare. Somewhere in a palace office, a man in a wrinkled suit probably whispered, "My God, she uploaded memories." And then 27 columnists immediately began typing through tears. It's been a week. At this point, the UK media are treating Meghan's anniversary post like it was a solar eclipse that permanently altered the monarchy's gravitational field. Because according to the latest royal hysteria, King Charles and Camilla were apparently furious after Meghan and Prince Harry's anniversary content dominated headlines while the king was visiting Northern Ireland. The tabloids framed it as deliberate. Deliberate. As if Meghan sat in Montecito wearing a black turtleneck in a secret villain lair, waiting for palace schedules before posting a smiling photo with her husband. And honestly, the funniest part is that the media themselves created the overshadowing. Think about it. If the palace wanted attention on the Ireland visit, the British press could have simply covered the Ireland visit. Revolutionary concept, I know. But instead, they flooded timelines with Meghan's photos, Meghan's marriage, Meghan's Instagram, Meghan's body language, Meghan's intentions, Meghan's breathing patterns, probably. Then, after spending 48 hours obsessing over her, they turned around and screamed, "Why is everyone talking about Meghan?" Because you are talking about Meghan. The call is coming from inside the press office. And let's discuss the actual crime here. Meghan and Harry posted anniversary photos on their anniversary. That's it. That's the scandal. Human beings celebrating their marriage on the date they got married. We've officially reached a point where existing happily outside the royal institution is treated like treason. You almost have to admire how deeply unserious this entire ecosystem has become. The same commentators who spent years insisting Harry and Meghan were irrelevant are now panicking because an anniversary post generated more public engagement than a royal tour funded by centuries of inherited privilege and taxpayer symbolism. That contradiction alone tells the whole story. Because here's what really bothers them. Meghan and Harry still command attention without the palace machine. That was never supposed to happen. The royal system depends heavily on controlled visibility. Access is power. Appearances are power. Press relations are power. The institution decides who gets photographed, who gets promoted, who gets protected, who gets blamed, who gets blamed. It's an old structure built on hierarchy, silence, and carefully managed narratives. Then Harry and Meghan walked away, and somehow they still mattered. That's the wound underneath all this rage. Because if the Sussexes can leave the institution and still attract massive global interest, then the palace loses one of its greatest weapons, exclusivity. Suddenly, the public is engaging with personalities, not titles alone. Connection becomes more important than protocol, and that terrifies parts of the establishment. Especially because Meghan continues to break one unspoken royal rule over and over again. She refuses to look miserable. That's the part they cannot process. She was supposed to disappear quietly. She was supposed to fail publicly. She was supposed to crawl back apologizing for not appreciating palace life enough. Instead, she built a new life in California, launched projects, gave speeches, raised her children privately, and posts anniversary photos looking relaxed and loved. The horror. You can practically hear the tabloid editors screaming into antique teacups. And the anniversary post itself? Completely normal. Sweet family memories, throwback moments, personal photos, nothing remotely hostile. You know, the same wedding the British media once called magical before deciding she was simultaneously too glamorous, too American, too confident, too biracial, too successful, too visible, too quiet, too outspoken, too everything. Meghan has been forced to exist inside contradictions so ridiculous they'd embarrass a soap opera writer. Meanwhile, other royals can literally leak stories against each other, brief against family members, wage PR wars through sources, and somehow Meghan posting wedding memories becomes the true threat to national stability. Fascinating little ecosystem they've built there. And notice how often the criticism reveals resentment rather than logic. She overshadowed the king. If that's true, ask yourself why. Seriously, ask it honestly. Why would a simple anniversary post generate more public attention than an official royal engagement? The answer is uncomfortable for royal traditionalists because people are emotionally invested in Harry and Meghan's story. Whether people love them or hate them, they react to them deeply, constantly, globally, and the media knows it. That's why the same newspapers claiming the Sussexes are irrelevant publish 15 articles a day about them. Irrelevance does not pay newsroom salaries. Meghan basically fuels entire opinion columns at this point. Somewhere in London, a tabloid editor sees Meghan trending and immediately approves another mortgage payment. And there's another layer here nobody wants to admit. A lot of people see Harry and Meghan's relationship as authentic specifically because it survived institutional pressure. The public watched them endure relentless scrutiny, racism debates, family tension, security battles, media harassment, and nonstop ridicule. Yet, they still appear deeply united. That resonates with people, especially younger audiences who care less about hierarchy and more about emotional honesty. The monarchy still operates like a centuries-old corporation trying to market duty and stoicism. Harry and Meghan market humanity, vulnerability, and partnership. Different audiences respond to different things. And the palace media absolutely hates that comparison. Because once people start comparing emotional warmth versus institutional stiffness, the royal mystique starts wobbling. And honestly, the tabloid panic over timing is absurd. Were Harry and Meghan supposed to postpone acknowledging their anniversary because Charles had a trip scheduled? Should they submit Instagram drafts for palace approval first? Terribly sorry, Your Majesty. We nearly uploaded our wedding photos before checking the royal calendar. Catastrophic oversight. The monarchy is not the sun around which all human behavior must orbit, though certain commentators clearly still believe Britain exists in 1824. What makes this even more ridiculous is that royal tours themselves often compete for coverage anyway. Palace households brief against one another constantly. Royal reporters have admitted for years that internal rivalries exist. Different camps leak stories. Different teams fight for headlines. The institution survives partly through media choreography. So suddenly pretending that Meghan invented attention competition is laughable. She just refuses to play by palace rules anymore. And that independence is precisely why the establishment remains obsessed with her. Because despite everything thrown at her, Meghan has remained culturally influential. Fashion brands still sell out after she wears them, speeches trend online, public appearances spark global discussion. Her projects attract enormous coverage. Even people who claim to despise her monitor her every move like they're tracking weather patterns. At this point, anti-Meghan commentators are basically unpaid fan accounts, and there's something deeply revealing about how aggressively joy itself gets policed when it comes to Meghan. It's exhausting. The woman could rescue a puppy from a river, and somebody in the Daily Mail comment section would accuse her of disrespecting corgis. Meanwhile, Harry often gets treated like he's some hypnotized hostage instead of a 41-year-old man who repeatedly says he loves his wife and chose this life himself. There's still this bizarre refusal among some royal commentators to acknowledge his agency. At some point, people need to accept a simple possibility. Harry genuinely prefers this life. That possibility seems to emotionally devastate parts of the British press, because Harry leaving shattered the fairy tale they depended on. The monarchy works best when every royal appears permanently devoted to the firm. Harry choosing family, privacy, and distance disrupted the script. Then Meghan became the symbolic target for all the anger surrounding that disruption. And years later, the obsession still hasn't cooled. Think about how bizarre that is. A couple living thousands of miles away posts anniversary memories, and major British newspapers react like DEFCON 1 has been declared. That's not indifference, that's fixation. And honestly, the public notices it more and more now. People are starting to recognize the pattern. Every single Meghan story becomes inflated into a morality play. Every narrative bends toward outrage regardless of evidence. Even neutral moments become controversy content. The machine cannot stop because outrage is profitable. And beneath all the noise sits one uncomfortable truth. Harry and Meghan are still one of the most commercially and culturally valuable stories connected to the monarchy. That's why the press can't let go. That's why every post becomes breaking news. That's why every appearance triggers 50 opinion pieces. That's why anniversary photos become overshadowing. Because the Sussexes still command attention organically in ways the institution often struggles to manufacture artificially. And you know what's especially ironic? The anniversary post itself was fundamentally about love, family, memories, and survival. It was soft, personal, nostalgic, the exact kind of content most people scroll past with a little smile before continuing their day. But the royal outrage industry transformed it into palace warfare because conflict is more profitable than happiness. Normal people saw wedding photos. The tabloids saw a constitutional crisis. That disconnect says everything. And maybe, just maybe, part of the reason Meghan continues to resonate globally is because people are tired of watching women punished for refusing to shrink themselves to make institutions comfortable. Meghan entered one of the most rigid establishments on Earth and was expected to adapt flawlessly while enduring levels of scrutiny that would break most people psychologically. Then when she spoke openly about isolation, racism, mental health struggles, and media abuse, she was accused of betrayal instead of being heard compassionately. A lot of viewers remember that, especially women of color, especially younger generations who increasingly reject the idea that silence equals dignity. So when Meghan posts joyful anniversary memories years later, many people interpret it not as manipulation, but resilience, survival, a couple choosing each other despite extraordinary pressure. That emotional narrative is powerful, whether the palace likes it or not. And honestly, the royal establishment helped create it. If Harry and Meghan had quietly remained working royals with occasional ribbon-cutting appearances, public fascination probably would have faded into routine. Instead, the constant warfare elevated their story into something much larger culturally. The institution turned them into symbols. Now, every smiling photo carries layered meaning people project onto it. Freedom, escape, love, defiance, healing, celebrity, privilege, modernity, rebellion. Everybody sees something different, but whatever people feel, they react. And reaction drives modern media. Which brings us back to the funniest part of all this. The tabloids are accidentally admitting Meghan still has enormous cultural power. You do not accuse someone of overshadowing the king unless you believe they possess extraordinary influence. That sentence itself is the confession, because if Meghan were truly irrelevant, nobody would care what she posted. Instead, entire news cycles bent around anniversary photos. And somewhere in California, Meghan was probably just eating dinner with Harry, while British columnists wrote 2,000 furious words about Instagram. Incredible work, everyone. Truly a thriving media ecosystem. At this point, the royal commentary industry resembles a reality show that refuses cancellation despite the main cast moving to another network years ago. The palace wants distance from Harry and Meghan, while the tabloids desperately need them for traffic. So the result is this endless contradiction where commentators simultaneously demand the Sussexes disappear and rely on them economically. It's one of the most transparent codependent relationships in modern media. And viewers are noticing. People increasingly understand how outrage cycles operate. They see how stories are framed. They see how narratives get recycled. They see how Meghan is often treated differently from other royals for doing objectively normal things. An anniversary post should not trigger national debate. Yet, here we are. Because in the strange universe of royal media, Meghan breathing near a camera remains front-page material 6 years after leaving royal duties. That level of obsession tells its own story. And honestly, the Sussex anniversary photos were lovely. Warm, personal, affectionate, human. They reminded people why so many connected with Harry and Meghan during the early days of their relationship. There was visible chemistry, ease, genuine affection, not performance, not stiff choreography, just two people clearly attached to one another. You cannot fake that consistently for years under pressure. And maybe that authenticity is what still unsettles parts of the royal establishment most of all, because institutions can manage protocol, they can manage optics, they can manage schedules, they can manage press access. But authentic emotional connection with the public? That's harder to manufacture. Harry and Meghan have it naturally with many people. So the next time tabloids scream that Meghan overshadowed a royal event by posting family memories on her wedding anniversary, remember what they're accidentally admitting. They still cannot compete with her cultural relevance. Not after the attacks. Not after the smears, not after the documentaries, not after the endless outrage campaigns. Years later, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, uploads anniversary photos, and the entire royal media machine starts hyperventilating into ceremonial cushions. That's not irrelevance. That's influence. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.